what happened quite recently was really quite scary lah. Basically, right now in Europe, the conflict between Russia and Ukraine has escalated to another level. This is where Russia actually shot some missiles from Russia, and it actually hit Ukraine. And this is in response on what Ukraine did a little bit earlier. So I think the main question right now is how will this impact us over in Malaysia? The whole thing of it all, that even though Malaysia is very, very far from the conflict over in Europe, but it will impact us one way or another. And the whole thing of it all is that today we live in a very connected society, and we live in a very connected economy. So how it will impact us over in Malaysia is number one, the prices of crude oil and also the price of gas would increase. So one of the reasons why I'm saying this is that we have to remember that Russia is one of the top exporters for crude oil. And when I looked at the data, it is one of the second or the third largest producers of crude oil in the world. They are coming right after Saudi, America, the third is Russia. So Russia is one of the top players for the crude oil or for producing crude oil. And in terms of their exports, Russia exports about 4 to 5 million barrels per day. It's a lot. It's a lot, right? So that's number one. Number two, we have to remember that every oil field, there is a mixture between crude oil and also gas, right? So right now, every time when we drill, there is some gas deposits, and when we drill, there's also crude oil deposits, right? So when Russia says that they have oil, we also have to remember that Russia is also a gas producer, right? And Russia is one of the top gas producers in the world, and they actually produce about 16 to 18% of the global output, right? And we have to remember that Russia was one of the biggest seller for gas, especially in Europe. Let me repeat that. Russia was one of the biggest exporters for gas in Europe. So what happened was when the pipeline between Russia and Europe, actually there was a disruption in that pipeline. What happened was gas prices in Europe, or energy prices in Europe, shot up quite significantly. And Europe actually depends on Russia's gas to help heat their homes. So basically, if the war escalates between Russia and Ukraine, these two resources would be more expensive. And the thing that we have to remember is both oil and gas, and also both oil and gas is very important, especially for the modern economy. Let me explain why. With regards to gas, as I said, gas is actually used in certain energy turbines. So what they do is they burn the gas, and when there's enough steam or enough heat, what will happen is they will move the turbine, and when you move the turbine, it'll help generate electricity, right? So when gas prices were to increase, right, the prices of energy will also increase, and we can actually see it very evidently over in Europe lah. Basically, when the Europeans started doing sanctions on Russian gas, and energy prices over in Europe actually got very, very expensive, right? The second thing is crude oil, and why crude oil is very important in today's modern economy is that crude oil is what we use. We refine crude oil and it becomes petrol, and petrol, we use it to fuel our cars lah, to move from point A to point B, right? And in a modern society, it's very, very important. From our house, we go to work, and then from work, we go back to our house, and then maybe from our house, we go to eat, right? So if these two things were to increase, this will definitely have a significant impact on the economy, especially when it comes to the inflation, right? So what happened was during the conflict between Russia and Ukraine escalated, where Russia actually launched some of the missiles over to in Ukraine. What happened is that we could see that crude oil prices actually spiked up a little bit, right? I think it's a couple of percentage lah, right? As crude oil and gas, crude oil actually spiked up a little bit, right? So as I mentioned, for Malaysia, if these resources were to go up in price, right, one of the things which we have to remember have been flowed, right, is diesel. Diesel right now is already afloat lah, basically, and we have to remember that if the global energy prices were to go up, and if diesel were to track the global energy prices to actually price diesel in Malaysia, definitely it will go up. So if diesel were to go up, what will happen is that logistics will go up. We have to remember that most big trucks actually, or most big lorry actually uses diesel, right? And if diesel were to go up in price, the things that we use on a daily basis all needs to have some form of transport. And let me give you a very simple example. So right now, assuming for dinner today, we had a plate of rice and also some fish and also some vegetable. In order for us to get the fish, right, the fishermen will need to actually fuel their boats. And what they will do is they fill their boats with diesel. So the boats will go from shore, from the beach. They will go to wherever they want to catch the fish, and then they will use diesel to power the boats back, right? So then itself, we can see back and forth it uses diesel. On top of that, from the beach, these transport companies, right? They need to transport it maybe to a bigger warehouse, right, or a bigger store, right, before it gets dispersed. So then itself, it uses a diesel from the beach to maybe a warehouse where they sort the fish and whatnot. And then from the warehouse, it goes to the supermarket. So we can see that each part of the journey, it uses diesel. And if diesel were to go up in price, then we can see the prices of food, like fish, being more expensive. On top of that, say assuming right now, for our rice, right? For the rice, from the fields, it needs to be processed. So from the fields, it goes to the manufacturers, right? So from the field, it will take a truck or lorry. It goes to the pengilang lah, or the manufacturers. And what they do is they separate the rice and the husk, right? And then from there, it goes to a big warehouse, right? And then from that big warehouse, then it goes to the location, maybe the supermarket. And from there, it goes through a couple of rounds of transport. So we have to remember, if diesel prices were to go up, every part of the journey will be a bit more expensive, right? So we can see lah, even food has already gone up in price, right? And or rather, if crude oil were to increase, or if diesel were to increase, what will happen is that our prices of food will go up, right? And I think quite recently we can also see that the school bus fares has also increased, right? And the whole thing of it all is that the bus drivers, right, or this the welfare for the bus drivers, they have a association. They said that they're going to increase the school bus fares by about 20 to 30%. Then itself already, we could see that this is the impact. And one of the reasons why is that their main official reason is that they had to increase the bus fares. One of the reasons why is that the cost for buying spare parts is a lot more expensive. So over here, we can see after the increase of inflation, not only the food is getting more expensive, but the price to even send our kids to school back and forth, right, is also more expensive. right? As I mentioned, the school bus or the school bus fares may increase during this time, or rather they already are planning to increase the bus fare. And the whole thing of it all is their operating cost has gone up, and one of the components of the operating cost is spare parts. And as I mentioned before, everything will go up if diesel price were to go up. Not only food, but also things like that we use on a daily basis, right? And even spare parts. I mean, the spare parts need to come from the big factory, right? From the big factory, it needs to be transported to maybe the warehouses, and then from the warehouses, then people will buy this the spare parts for the bus, right? So that's number one. The prices of oil and gas will go up. Number two is the prices of food, as I mentioned. The third is the prices of wheat, right? And Russia is one of the top global wheat producers, right? Why will this matter for us over in Malaysia, right? Why will we care if wheat prices were to go up? Basically, wheat is used to make roti canai, our bread, and also our mee lah, basically, right? So if wheat prices were to go up, imagine paying more for your roti canai. In fact, during 2000s, roti canai used to cost about 1 ringgit only. Right now, roti canai is about 250. Let me repeat this again. This is so important. Before this, during the early 2000s, roti canai used to be 1 ringgit only. But right now, roti canai is about 250. And part of the reasons why is things around us are getting very, very much more expensive, right? So with the conflict happening over there, prices of wheat will go up. And if prices of wheat were to go up, prices of roti canai, mee, and also bread would also follow suit, right? I think this is one, two, this is third, this is fourth, right? The fourth thing is that the cost of living will go up. Basically, if our basic necessities, electricity, as I mentioned, some electricity plants they use or some electricity power plants they use gas to power it. As I mentioned, in Europe, you could see that when gas was expensive, to heat the rooms or to heat the houses in Europe, it costs more. So right now, if gas and also oil were to go up, oil, as I mentioned, is a very basic necessity for our daily lives. We need it to actually go back and forth the office. We need our cars to maybe go and buy food, right? So our basic cost of living will go up, right? And as I mentioned, necessities like even food also would definitely go up. So what this basically means is this lah. If things were to get expensive, right? If our salary stays relatively stagnant, basically we are getting a little bit poorer lah, basically, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why I've created this channel, right? To always talk a little bit about investing and also staying invested, right? And that is one of the reasons why I'm having this episode, right? I'm sure some of you guys are wondering, oh wow, with the war, what's going to happen over in Malaysia? And right now we are a more globalized economy, and if something were to happen, say in Europe, the whole world will feel it, basically, right? So what I basically want to say is, please stay invested. Number one, please know that inflation is going to go a bit higher. Number two, and number three, if you can, make sure that your investments, in terms of returns, are beating the inflation rates, right? I think I'll say this, and this is a very honest observation, right? If we continue investing traditionally, a lot of the returns from traditional assets were to give returns of about 5%, about 4 to 5%, right? And honestly, if we think that inflation is truly 1.9%, then the 5% from very popular funds would suffice lah. Basically, we are not only beating inflation, but we are also building wealth. But if you feel that inflation numbers are a bit more higher than 5%, right? Maybe look towards switching your investments. And I'm also reminding myself, I have my ASBs lah. My ASB is one of my very, I mean, ASB is a very safe asset, but honestly, is it beating inflation, right? That's the question which always crossed my mind, right? And during the same period, I have invested in the equity markets in Malaysia and also in US.